Get started, you'll need a ball or a pillow, something that you can squeeze. And also, I just wanted to give some imagery to work with. This is a book called Pelvic Power by Eric Franklin, and it has a great diagram of the bones of the pelvis. So this is looking up from underneath, and you'll see this is the tailbone at the back, pubic bone down here, and then sit bones on either side. So these four bony landmarks are important because the muscles of the pelvic floor connect to those four bones, and they would fill in this space. That's what these little lines are, just representing where the pelvic floor would go. This is the ilium, half the pelvis. There's a sacrum here as well. But in particular, pay attention to the sit bones, because that's the main ones we're going to be imagining today. And one of the reasons why we're looking at the bones of the pelvis is because it can be really difficult to sense or feel the muscles of the pelvic floor. If you haven't practiced, you're not very aware of them. So we're going to use the bony landmarks to help you get those muscles working. Let's start laying on your back. And first, just take a minute to kind of wiggle around, get comfortable, and do a quick body scan. So before we actually begin moving, I'm just checking in with where my weight is distributed on the floor. So I'm noticing one foot feels a little bit heavier than the other. I'm holding on a little extra in this right leg, so I'm going to think of my feet lengthening and widening, the sacrum releasing into the mat, the space between my shoulder blades releasing down, and my collarbone widening out to the sides. And then once you feel like your weight is pretty evenly distributed, you're going to just start to notice the sensation of your body breathing. And then let's connect the movement of the pelvis to the breath. So first, just exhale every last bit of air out into space. And then inhale, widen your sit bones. Exhale, narrow your sit bones. Inhale to widen. Exhale, narrow. Pelvic floor lengthens as you widen and contracts as you narrow. Keep that movement going nice and slow. Inhale apart. Exhale together. No tension in the neck. So it's a misconception that Kegels are the only way to strengthen the pelvic floor. This mindful rocking of the pelvis is a great way to strengthen those muscles dynamically. And then we're going to change it up a little bit. So now, slow motion march. Let's float the right knee up. Inhale, knee up. Exhale, place it down. Inhale, right knee up. Exhale, place that foot down. Now put your mind's eye again into the sit bones, the bones of the pelvis. And as the knee comes toward you, that side of the pelvis rocks toward you, the opposite side rocks away from you. So left sit bone rocks up, right sit bone rocks down. So now we're getting that little bit of twist. It's very small, very subtle, but there is that potential for movement around the sacrum, the two halves of the pelvis in opposition. Right side toward, left side away. Left side toward, right side away. One more time. And then rest. And now roll to the side. Find your ball. And you're going to place the ball right between your knees. Feet flat on the mat. Wiggle around again to that quick body scan. And just notice if you're gripping in your toes. Try to let them spread out. And then press down into your feet. Lift your hips up like a drawbridge going up. And then release the pelvis back down. So rather than rolling through the spine up and down, I'm pressing the pelvis up, narrowing the sit bones together, and then releasing and widening the sit bones apart. So keeping the focus on the muscles of the pelvic floor, the bones of the pelvis, even though other muscles are going to get in on the action here, because you couldn't do this movement without the bigger mover muscles, but we're narrowing the sit bones and widening. So the more that you can focus on that expansion of the pelvis and contraction, the more likely we'll start to get that support from those deep muscles, narrowing and widening. And now this time, keep your hips up. Just release a few inches down, widen the sit bones, and then narrow. And I'm squeezing the ball, but very gently, just enough to keep it from falling to the floor. Narrow and widen. Press up, sit bones together, sink down, sit bones apart. Pelvic floor doming up as the sit bones come together and then releasing down. Exhale up, inhale down. One more time. And then release it. Good. Take the ball, roll it away, and then sway your knees side to side. Twist all the way to the right, look to the left, breathe into that left side of your ribs, and then release it back to center, swing it to the other side, look to the right, big inhale into the right side of the ribs, exhale back to center. And then roll all the way to one side. Press yourself up to sitting. And you're going to flip over onto all fours. First, have a little wardrobe adjustment. And then get your hands right under your shoulders, knees right under your hips. And you're going to start with your toes tucked. Now notice I'm not hanging in my joints. I'm not letting my ribs and my head sag down. I'm lifting through the ribs, filling in that space between my shoulder blades. And then I'm going to rock back toward my heels and rock forward toward my hands. So this is the basic movement, but now I want you to put your mind's eye back into your sit bones. And as you rock back, the sit bones widen, rock forward, they narrow. So we're going fairly slow, kind of a slow to moderate pace. Head and neck, nice and easy. Once more. And rock forward, and now open your knees apart, bring your feet in, so we're turning out, lateral rotation of the thigh bones. And then drop down onto your forearms. Find that long spine. So this is essentially the same position as what we would do if we were doing a flat-footed squat. We're going to rock back and forward. Sit bones widen, sit bones narrow. So it's also a great way to strengthen the pelvic floor is doing a flat-footed squat, but that's not possible. It's not accessible to everyone if you've got funky knees, tight hips, tight ankles. So this is a way you can get similar benefit without all those roadblocks. So we widen the sit bones, narrow, widen, and narrow. One more time. And then rock forward, take your knees together, feet out to the side. So now you're doing medial rotation of the femur bones. You can be on your hands or down on your forearms, whatever feels better to you. And then rock back, widen the sit bones, rock forward, narrow. Now notice when I rock back, I'm not going rounding my low back. Throughout, I'm keeping that kind of length of the head and tail reaching away from each other. The sacrum stays the same basic place. It's the two halves of my pelvis spreading apart like wings and then drawing back in. They widen and narrow. One more time. Come back to center, bring your knees back underneath you. Hands under your shoulders, knees under your hips. Wiggle around for a second. And now you're going to widen the sit bones and then narrow from here. So notice I'm keeping my legs still. I'm keeping my upper back the same shape. And I'm working on mobilizing the pelvis on the femur while strengthening the pelvic floor. So now, sit bones widen and narrow. Pelvic floor lengthens and shortens. No tension in the neck. Watch out for locking your elbows. Soft elbows. And now circle your hips around. Again, notice how my legs stay fairly still. My upper back stays the same. I'm widening my sit bones, go to the side, then narrow, shift to the side. So it's arch, side, curl, side. Reverse. Widen and narrow. Now the breath, you let the breath just flow nice and easy. Doesn't have to be on every move. A few more like that. Spread your tail feathers and then draw them together. And then rock back. Find your ball again. Take the ball between your knees. Knees back under your hips, toes tucked this time. And then first I'm going to fill in that space between my shoulder blades, bring my head back in line with my spine. Press down through my hands and toes and narrow my sit bones to lift my knees up. And then widen the sit bones as I release down. Now again, a lot of other muscles are getting in on the action here, but I want you to keep your focus on the pelvic floor. Narrow the sit bones. Widen. Exhale, narrow and lift. Inhale, release and widen. Now on the next one, you're going to keep your knees lifted. Hold it up. Narrow the sit bones. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Release down. Widen the sit bones. Exhale, narrow the